data, just trust the call. That's the fastest way to fall. That's how not to use AI and Qual. That's how not to use AI and Qual.
Welcome to this video where I talk a little bit more about how you or others have been using AI completely wrong. This time I'm going through a presentation where I present you with 7 assumptions, expectations, where things are actually go wrong, where people reject working with generative AI or any generative AI tools because of the way they actually approach it. And these are real life examples that I hear and come across, and they are something I've heard more than once. One point of view is I only accept someone as an assistant whom I've trained myself, whose training I am familiar with. One-to-one translation to an LLM is kind of difficult because if you look at the model sizes, and if somebody believes that they can train it him or herself with maybe just a few resources, just putting a computer there and train the model, but that doesn't quite work like that. You see the number of parameters, they go now into the billions and trillions, and you see it's like progressing from 2018 to 2023, and the next chart here goes to 2024, and you see the bubbles increase in size, and that's also it's indicating the model size. So that's not really something we can do unless we have lots of resources. So it's not something that an individual researcher or a small team can train by him or herself. But we know the kind of the data where it's trained on. So like books and websites and scientific articles, Wikipedia instructions manual, and a lot of stuff that's found on the internet. The ethical or legal side of it, it's a different issue that would demand a different presentation. Even if we would have a list of all the data that a model is trained on, and for some open source models, it is also available, it would take you years and years and years of reading it. And we're not talking about a year or two, we're reading more than 20 years, 8 hours reading per day. And then even after the 20 years, you wouldn't remember what you have been reading. So it's not really something feasible that we could do. And then there's also more goes into training, which is reinforcement learning and all of that kind of stuff. So what I'm always saying is we now have the ability to draw on that huge information where these models are trained on, and would be kind of a shame not to use it. And it's just a matter of how we are making use of that. So let's get to point number 2. ChatGPT does not produce the results that we have produced. So it's not consistent with what we have produced. So there is this expectation because it's a very intelligent machine, and everybody says it's so intelligent and doing work better than humans, and it's more efficient, and all, it's understandable where these kind of expectations are coming from, because we see lots of promises out there. So here the prompt was, which categories can be derived inductively from the following prompt. And then they found that only 2 of the 6 categories matched their own. But what's important here is the expectations that are here. If I run an analysis and an LLM runs the analysis, that we get the same results.
Don't expect it to match each time. It's language, not a perfect rhyme. Use the dance, don't fight the call. That's how to work with AI and Qual.
If I run an analysis and somebody else runs an analysis in qualitative research, we might also come to different results. Well, it's not about you run an analysis, the LLM runs analysis. So what about if we do this together, then we might not diverge so much. But let's continue with the next point. High expectations. An attempt to have ChatGPT interpret a passage that contained a slip of the tongue, which from a psychoanalytical perspective could be seen as an indicator of repression, was also unsuccessful. ChatGPT did not recognize it. Well, the circumstances of that that prompt was that ChatGPT just received in a sentence. Well, if you give just a sentence without much context, information to a human might also not get it. So if we expect good results back from ChatGPT, we also need to feed it with the respective information and not expect that ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever you work with, is kind of an oracle. Because of all the training data, it mystically knows what we want to know. No, it doesn't. It's only as good as what we input. Well, and the fourth one here is also something I see a lot, that people expect numbers. Please provide a list of the categories along with frequency of text passages identified for each. First of all, an LLM linking codes or categories, whatever, to data segments doesn't work at all. Also a wrong expectation. It only works if you implement some more complex procedures and chop the data into bits and pieces and use Python and all kind of stuff. So it would never work with a general purpose chatbot. This researcher was expecting frequencies, and then ChatGPT in this case was completely ignoring it. In other cases, it's probably just giving some numbers because you have asked about it, but those are probably wrong. Generative AI are large language model. They're not large counting models. So if you would expect them to do counting, well, you have to call on other tools, which is a possibility. And more LLMs do that automatically, that if there is a task that you ask them for, that they think, okay, we now need to call on Python, then they actually do that. Or you need to work with applications where it's built into the application that is called on some tools that can do the math. Yeah, but we are talking here about expectations to general purpose bots, that they can do this.
Use a whisk to paint your wall, you'll get nowhere at all. That's how not to use AI in Qual. It's not that AI's bad or wrong. You just ask it to dance to the wrong song. Match the tool to the job you call. That's how to use AI in Qual.
Number 5. If my assistant presented results that differed from my analysis, so my human assistant, I would discuss the specific passages of text on which we disagree. This isn't possible with an AI program. I'm not sure where this is coming from, probably from too little experience or also expectations. I give it a question and it comes with an answer and that's it. So let's just ask our little helper here, the O3 model from OpenAI. So dear LLM, if I were to ask you to create categories based on a methodological approach I specified, and you provide results that I disagree with because those results deviate from results that were previously validated with my team, can I discuss those with you? O3 answered,
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm here for. Inductive categories are never set in stone, but emerge from a dialogue between data, researchers, and, if you like, me as an AI partner.
And now it's up to you how you involve the AI in this process.
Step 1. You provide me with A, your research question, B, a sample of material or typical text passages, and C, the framework information for the coding, context, and analysis units. I provide an initial category system, including brief definitions and anchor examples.
So the LLM is now telling the researcher, this is the information I need for us to do good quality work. So also keep that in mind. If you're a bit lost in how you should formulate a prompt or what an LLM needs, go and ask the LLM. It often knows, if you provide a bit of the context of what you're doing, it knows what it needs to know, or it knows what you need to tell it, or ask it to ask you questions.
Step 2. Joint review. You tell me specifically which categories don't fit, are duplicated, or are missing. We clarify whether differences lie in the level of abstraction or in the focus, e.g., too narrow versus too broad. I explain why I suggested a specific code, so you can see how I think. Step 3. Revision and fine-tuning. Based on your feedback, I reformulate, merge, split, or add new categories. We can proceed iteratively, version 1, version 2, etc. Step 4. Validation. We'll examine additional text passages as examples. Does the system now fit? If a team is co-coding, you can bring your discussion points and I'll argue and learn based on your notes. Step 5. Documentation. I can output the final category list, including definitions, coding rules, and anchor citations in a table.
Then once you have come up with, modified some categories and discussed it, then you can validate it with some new data and to see whether it fits or we still need to do some adjustments. And then finally, there might be the coding framework that you are looking for. And depending on what you want, here in this example, it's categories, definitions, and some anchor examples. You could also ask for some coding rules if you wanted to. So this is an outcome after some process of, call it negotiation or conversation. In any case, an iterative process. So you get step by step to a coding frame like that is built also on your expertise, also your knowledge of the field and the data, and that then represents your data. As already mentioned, then applying or letting the LLM apply that coding frame, it's a different issue. But suggesting a coding frame, you can do that in an iterative process very well. So you might have also done that discussion with Gemini.
You can discuss, reject, renegotiate, or expand on every step with me, just like in your team meetings, only asynchronously and as often as you like. Just tell me what you don't like, and we'll adjust it together.
So an LLM doesn't get tired. It doesn't get angry at you even if you ask it for 5 times. The issue is if you go back and forth too many times, the model might get lost. So there is also something, if you discuss too long, sometimes it might be better to do like start a fresh chat. So hopefully that has given you a bit of an idea how a dialogue with an LLM can look like.
That's how to use AI in Qual.
So let's move on to assumption number 6. AI proponents recommend reviewing all the results, but if I must check everything myself, what's the point of having an assistant? That's like having a calculator that requires me to recalculate all the results myself, and that wouldn't be of any use either. I would call myself an AI proponent, but I would not kind of say you have to review and check everything. That happens if people still get stuck in their coding framework. Yes, you can get LLMs with some programming, so you need IT specialists or some to kind of chunk text and code text and keep the human in the loop to check everything, but that is also not a process I would recommend to do anyway, because it's not really utilizing the strengths of the LLM. So there's, in that sense, also the assumption behind it, let's kind of keep doing what we did the last 30 years. So when I talk also about process of verification, it's not kind of checking every line in text an LLM produced, but they're having the ability to check back with the original data. So that's a screenshot here of Q Insights, where if you look up an answer, you can always go back to the original source and see where an answer comes from. If you work with an LLM and use its strengths rather than, look at its limitation, it means to critically reflect the output of an AI assistant and not accepting a first answer as the final result. So a first answer, when we use it in a context of qualitative research, is probably most likely something to iterate on at a starting point where you can then go into conversation.
Think you can chat? Just one reply. No room to question, tweak or try. You've closed the door before the call. That's how
Now let's come to number 7. And that also, there's 2 things actually here in that particular quote. Some things were found today that had been overlooked the day before. So it's pointing out that LLMs are not reliable. Every time I ask a prompt, I will get a different answer. And then we have that expectation here that an LLM can do something like intercoder agreement. It cannot do that anyway. So that's a wrong assumption to begin with. But that more generalized one that I also hear a lot is that you don't get reliable results. Well, that is a feature of an LLM and not its fault, because it's called generative. And yes, it's built on statistics and it's probabilistic answers. But there's something like temperature setting. And the higher the temperature, the more variation you will have in the answers. If you set temperature to 0, then you always get the most 100% probable result that are coming out. But this will be boring because the sky is blue. If that is what is trained on, that's the most likely outcome that it learned, then you always get the sky is blue. But you don't want that, because the sky can be gray and it can be cloudy and it can all kinds of different shapes. But all these other shades, colors of blue, they are not as likely as, let's assume, the sky is blue, just as an example. So you do want some variety in your answer. And the more you want to use an LLM for brainstorming, the higher you want your temperature to be. But also for analysis, you want some variety, that it's not only giving you the most likely outcome here. With a general purpose bot, you cannot influence the temperature. You need to be in a playground to do that. So if you complain about that, well, maybe you just use a different tool where you can actually set temperature. If you use ChatGPT, the temperature is set to 0.7. You can, within the prompt, ask it for more variety or less variety, but you cannot yourself set the temperature. But this is something that is in the nature of an LLM. So it's not a flaw. It is just something you have to know and then to act accordingly. Not a reason to reject it.
That's how to use AI in Qual.
Oh, we actually have a number 8, expecting too much. If you read through this prompt, and this was actually asked to ChatGPT 3.5, what stress factors related to unemployment does the person mention? Please apply the inductive categorization method by the following also. Formulate the categories as specifically as possible based on the text, but not so specifically that they would apply only to this one individual. Only assign a category if the negative factor is also subjectively significant to the person.
You can chat, just
That is a mouthful.
no
If I would have, if I would get this instruction and this is how I could code, I probably have to sit down. Okay, what do I have to do here? Well, the same applies to an LLM.
So not to use AI in Qual.
So there's a couple of things fault with this prompt. There's a lot of ambiguity in it. So you expect a non-ambiguous result, but in the prompt, what does it mean? Subjectively significant. Well, the LLM will make some guess, but if you don't give it an example how it should do that, then it just is a guess. You also need to explain more your specific approach. You can just say, do this approach and assume it knows. It's always better to first ask, are you familiar with the approach? Or you just say, these are the 5 steps of the approach I would like you to go through. Then there's nothing in it to specify which level of generalization you actually want, because then the LLM can, come up with a category on a very abstract level or on a very descriptive level. If you don't specify it, well, you don't have to complain. Then the LLM does its best, but you don't have to wonder. So a more specific prompt that kind of takes into account the more specifics would look more like this. And it also would take it apart into tasks, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So do help the LLM if you have something more complex. It can do this, but you have to help it along. So this is only the first part of it. And that's kind of the second part of it. So you can also specify how the output should look like and so on. I don't want to go through specifically all the steps in this prompt, but just to kind of show you, if you just boom, give it lots of instruction at once, it probably doesn't perform that well. And if it's a prompt like this, you probably also would like to use a reasoning model. Yeah, so here also knowing a little bit about the various LLMs, and that not, ChatGPT is all. There are all these different models, and there might be also a better or worse model for different tasks.
Match the tool to the job you call. That's how to use AI in Qual.
So it's not only about the prompt. And also, as I mentioned, you don't have to become, the sophisticated prompt engineer. You can also ask an LLM to help you writing a good prompt. So it's rather about the basic knowledge of how large language models actually work and operate and how you interact with them. And I think that is more important than, being a sophisticated prompt engineer or having a diploma in prompt engineering.
Ask it once, believe it all. Don't read the data, just trust the call. That's the fastest way to fall. That's how not to use AI in Qual. Think you can chat? Just one reply. No room to question, tweak or try. You've closed the door before the call. That's how not to use AI in Qual. Don't expect it to match each time. It's language, not a perfect rhyme. Use the dance, don't fight the call. That's how to work with AI in Qual. Use a whisk to paint your wall. You'll get nowhere at all. That's how not to use AI in Qual. It's not that AI's bad or wrong. You just ask it to dance to the wrong song. Match the tool to the job you call. That's how to use AI in Qual.